Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a comparison between the Sony Alpha A6000 on the left and the Cyber-shot RX100M2 on the right. These are two very different cameras, one being an interchangeable-lens camera based around the E-mount with a 24.3 megapixel APS-C sensor under the hood, Wi-Fi, NFC, 11 frames per second continuous autofocus, a hybrid autofocus system at that, both phase and contrast detection, an OLED electronic viewfinder, articulating 3-inch display on the back, a whole host of different Play Memories applications designed for it. So at $799, you're getting a lot of kit here in what is literally the A6000 kit. The 16 to 50 millimeter power zoom pancake isn't an exceptional lens, but when it comes to kit glass, it outperforms anything else that you could try to match it up to. So the RX100M2 is really all about pocketability. We know that already. Priced originally at $750, and the Mark III that's about to launch next month is going to be priced at $850 more. And even if you go with the first generation RX100, which originally launched at $650, that's why people are inherently going to compare these. Now, the hobbyist, enthusiast, or pro is already going to be picking probably either one of these to be a B camera at best, and that's because, quite frankly, that's what it represents to many users, whether they desire full frame, whatever it may be. But for the average consumer that's looking for the best camera they can buy, you're looking at two of the best options out there in their form, and that's because you're getting incredible picture and video quality in a form factor that most of the competition cannot touch. Now, the Mark II doesn't have an APS-C class sensor. You're looking at a 1-inch sensor. It's the same sensor that's been in the 1 at this 2 and soon to be 3, although it has changed in terms of how it gathers light. But otherwise, the lens stayed the same in the first and second generation. You're getting a 29 to 100 millimeter, 35 millimeter equivalent here. By the way, I'm not going to get into the whole crop factor. Those of you that know about the difference in terms of the sensors and crop factors, you already know that here f1.8 is not the same as f1.8 here on the E-mount camera with an APS-C sensor. And I don't want to get too technical, but what it comes down to is that this camera, in its form factor, with, by the way, Wi-Fi and NFC, just like the A6000, a mode dial that's also, as you may have noticed, very similar to the A6000, as well as the same hot shoe mount that the A6000 sports, which I didn't mention earlier. Very similar flash that you could argue is just about identical in terms of form and function. And then essentially the same articulating display, except you're getting all of this in a much smaller package. So it's a matter of what you're actually looking for, and if form factor and being able to fit a camera in your pocket, if you're subscribing to the belief that the best camera is the one that actually travels with you, and I do believe that, especially for most average users that end up buying interchangeable lens systems, desiring better image quality, expecting it because they're spending more. In this case, you aren't necessarily, especially if you're picking up the Mark III, since that's $800, which is exactly the same price as this kit, the A6000. The point is that both of these cameras, as I've mentioned over, will deliver amazing quality. But this is the camera most of those users should be picking up, because when it comes to simply leaving a camera in auto, that's exactly what Sony's Cyber-shot RX line is so good at doing. But if you want to expand beyond the auto mode, this camera is going to give you the ability, and that's because its menu system is very similar to the menu system you're going to find right here on the A6000. In fact, almost identical. And that's important to note in this comparison as well. So, as I've pointed out, both cameras have Wi-Fi, NFC, basically the same articulating display. No electronic viewfinder here. That's an optional accessory that will run you $450, and that price has not softened. Let me bring that into focus here. Has not come down since launch. So this is still $450 now retail. EDU discount maybe applies, but the only other cameras that works with that will work with that it's really designed for, the one you're looking at here, the RX1, the HX50V that I've reviewed, and the Mark III doesn't need it because it has a built-in viewfinder in place of the flash, essentially. The flash has moved over to where the hot shoe is. So when it comes to the camera systems, as I was mentioning before, and what you get in that menu system, even though we've got a Cyber-shot camera right here, the menu system is really very, very similar. And that's what's surprising when you compare these, is that you don't expect that when looking at these cameras. So it's not identical. I'll start out by saying that, because it really isn't, but very, very close. And they're both lending from the alpha style of menus, and that makes sense because it is popular, it is what works, it's direct access to the controls that you want on the fly. And I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit here so you get a closer look. You can see right there, very similar, and it's just a little bit tighter on, well, first of all, we've got a different aspect ratio. I didn't point that out. I should have. Also, there's a screen protector right now on the Mark II screen. That's why we're getting a bit of glare that we're not getting here on the A6000. But in terms of performance, again, you're getting a very similar look and feel, but the form factor is the key difference, and of course the expandability, because what I just showed you before in regard to this accessory, this is pretty much it. Beyond going with an electronic viewfinder, you can pick up, by the way, this is a superior OLED viewfinder to the one you're getting on the A6000, but beyond that you can hook up an external microphone. But really, other than that, what else would you want to attach to a camera that is all about portability? And it does have, as I mentioned, HDMI out, and that USB port right here, the multi-port, the exact same multi-port that we're getting with the A6000, so no different of a goal here. In terms of video modes, also really, really similar. Both of these cameras are going to give you AVC HD at 28 megabits per second, 1080p, 60p, 60i, 24p, and then of course you can also record an MP4. If you go with the RX100, the original generation, you don't have all of those video options. You don't have the 60p, excuse me. It caps out at 24p and 60i. So that was one of the upgrades with the RX100 Mark II. The Mark III has even further enhancements now with the new codec. You're getting a bump up to 50 megabits per second. If you're trying to compare that $800 camera to this, which makes sense as well. I'll probably reserve that from when I actually get my hands on it. But I can tell you, when it comes to taking shots in auto, which I'm going to keep referring to over and over again, even though this was not in auto, you're going to get better results, I think, for the average user out of the Mark II. And that's simply because the A6000 is meant to be used, not left in auto. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't perform very well in auto, but like any interchangeable lens camera, it expects you to do some work. It's still very intelligent in its auto intelligent mode, much like the Mark II, but I really feel like the Mark II is that killer point and shoot that everybody on the market would buy if they knew exactly how good it actually was. And the Mark III, really the culmination of that with the new lens, EVF built in, which is the same OLED EVF from the RX10, so that's a good thing. That bump up in video quality I mentioned, but here the video quality is pretty much a wash. The A6000 is a little bit better than the RX100 Mark II, but because they're both leaning on the Beyond's X processor, which is a good thing, that's still Sony's latest chip driving all of their cameras right now, the JPEG engines, they really have a lot in common. If this had a higher bit rate, we'd see an even larger improvement, like I am, expecting to see with the Mark III, but that's not the case with the A6000. Video does look very good. Some of the best video that I've seen from a non-VG camera from the E-mount, or I'll say A7 or A7R, especially with that continuous autofocus that does best every other NEX, now alpha mirrorless APS-C camera ever made by Sony. So autofocus here trounces the RX100 Mark II, but again, this is all about portability. If you're going to buy something like the A6000, then you can pick up lenses, whether you want to get something like this 10 to 18 wide angle, which has come down in price. It does have stabilization. This is a favorite lens of mine. And then my other favorite E-mount lens when it comes to APS-C is the Power Zoom 18 to 200. I mean, between this lens and the wide angle, you're done. You have your entire range. Granted, nothing prime, both of these lenses yield amazing results. And when you think about how light your bag can be, looking at that's your entire system. Let me move the 100 Mark II over for a second. That's it. It's your entire system. Traditionally, this would be a gear bag with a much larger digital SLR with an APS-C sensor, maybe full frame if you wanted to jump to it, but then of course the glass would be much larger to match. But this is why the A6000 isn't for everyone, and this video is a comparison based on trying to help all of you decide which is right for you. The RX100 Mark II, on the other hand, is a system in itself also, because really this is, as I've mentioned many times, the ideal camera for the person that is casual or advanced, but really just wants top-notch image and video quality. And you're not going to get anything else in this form factor. The glass on here, the Zeiss glass, f1.8, it's not constant throughout, but it is solid in terms of its range. You know, the Mark III, you've got f1.8 to 2.8 now as its range, which, as well as an actual redesign, instead of the 29 to 100 we have here, you've got 24 to 70, same T-star coated Zeiss glass, but a different piece of glass overall. And there's a reason. Sony obviously has taken more notes from consumers about what all of you want in this pocket-friendly camera. The EVF, which now pops out of where this flash is, a clear sign of that, and I think everyone's happy to see that added. That's a big enhancement for this camera. And in many ways, the Mark III is the upgrade that many hoped for in the Mark II. But again, any of the RX100s really could be compared to this because of pricing. But of course, the A6000, hands down, is the better camera on any day. It's a matter of what you're willing to carry. And if this is all you're willing to carry, something that's going to get in a pocket, if that's the difference between you taking pictures and not the Mark, any of the Marks, I should say, the RX100s, really should be where your money goes. And that's why I recommend it to every single person that asks me what is the right camera under $1,000. Because if you are interested in an interchangeable lens system, then you already know pretty much where you're headed. If you're not sure, then this is probably going to be a camera that will last you for a good number of years. Granted, Sony likes to update it quicker than anyone even updates smartphones at this point. It still really does stand the test of time, and it's all about the sensor. I mean, the sensor has not changed fundamentally, even though they've changed the way it collects light, and that says a lot about it. When it comes to battery life, you're going to do better with the A6000. I haven't mentioned that. I do want to. Battery life definitely better here. I mean, there are just a bevy of inherent advantages to having the A6000. I would pick it any given day, but then again, when I'm going out at night, the B camera is the RX100 Mark II. In fact, the RX100 Mark II is my excuse for not being able to basically ever tell you that I don't have a camera with me. And that makes it a critical tool in the arsenal, at least that I've got, of different equipment, because there are many times that I don't want to take out something even in this form factor, and I think that applies to a lot of you as well. And that's why this is such a difficult comparison, because even though they're night and day in terms of what they would deliver in terms of paper and what you'd expect because of the sensor, as well as all the different options that I keep mentioning that an interchangeable lens system like the E-mount has to offer, especially now you can stick full frame lenses like the FE70 to 200 that I have been reviewing. So there are just so many advantages to going with the A6000. So if you don't mind the size, I'm going to tell every single one of you the A6000 is the camera to buy. No question about it. Or an NEX6 or 7 for that matter. But really the A6000 represents the best, the culmination, the most modern, and it should, since it is the most recent APS-C mirrorless camera from Sony. But as I've said throughout the course of this video, if it's all about what you can carry and really having uncompromised performance, or I should say the best compromise that's out there, this is it right here. And the Mark III will be an even better offering, should be. I won't say it is because I haven't got it yet. And quite frankly, I'm not in love with the fact that we're losing a little bit of the reach of this lens. but when you take into account that you're getting that f1.8 to 2.8 performance as opposed to the range on this lens, it certainly seems like a good trade-off, especially since it's only a little bit larger than the Mark II, and the Mark II was only a little bit larger than the original RX100. So it's really all about what you need, what you're willing to carry. Do you plan to buy more lenses? Do you plan to invest, by the way, in the Play Memory Store, which this camera does not have access to? The Mark I does not have access to because no Wi-Fi, but the Mark III now will have access to the Play Memory Store. So a limitation of this camera that would make this comparison even more interesting, the Mark III. Can't wait to do that comparison, because really it just gets closer and closer to what the A6000 offers, but without the ability to pull that Zeiss lens off of there. But the beauty is, in a pocketable camera, you're not going to find a better pairing of sensor to lens. So really, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, whichever of these you end up buying, 800 here, 700 here or less, even the Mark III, as I've mentioned through the course of the video, 800 mid-June or late June launch, and the original RX100 can now be found for, I think, around 500, somewhere in that vicinity. So you get the idea. They're close. People will inherently compare them, especially people who aren't exactly sure what they want. And that's why I'm sharing this video with all of you, because again, to anyone who knows exactly what they want, they don't need to watch this. They know they want the pocketable camera or they want the system. And it's really that simple. And you can't, at the end of the day, even though I have, really compare what an APS-C class sensor can do to a 1-inch sensor. It's more about comparing what's relative to what you're going to actually end up using compared to allowing to collect dust. And that's what I hope to have helped to shed light on through the course of this video. So both are amazing cameras. Neither will be collecting dust with me. And again, the RX100 is a series that for me is kind of an intangible at this point. It is my B camera. When I don't want to take out the digital SLR weight, the RX100 Mark II goes with me, and soon the Mark III will be replacing it. On the other hand, the A6000's another perfect B camera for when you don't want to take out the full frame, equipment that is 2 to 3 times its size. So both have that same appeal going for them, which is what make each of them so unique, in my opinion. And again, because so many of the features are similar, from the hot shoe, Wi-Fi, NFC, Play Memory application store, it's just an inherent comparison that I think everyone needs to make, whether they would like to or not at one point or another, because there's also overlap here. Especially, again, this comparison really was only about using this kit glass. And in most instances, as I've said, the Zeiss glass on the smaller censored 100 and Mark II and soon to be Mark III is going to give you better results on auto than what you will accomplish with the kit glass with the larger APS-C sensor. So I hope that rounded everything out. I didn't call this a quick comparison because, frankly, I knew it wasn't going to be. These are cameras that are both really compelling, have great feature sets, and because pricing has softened on the 100 series and the A6000 is starting lower than any other model that it basically is succeeding, the NEX6, or if you wanted to get wild and say the 7, it's even tougher to really decide between these two. It's more difficult, and it's questionable, I think, for many of you, and hopefully this has resolved a lot and answered a lot of those questions. If you have any more, please feel free to post them, and of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.